The US dollar index between January of 2025 and March of 2025 has weakened considerably. In fact, the US dollar has just witnessed the largest 4-day drop since November of 2022 and May of 2020 that both marked the very beginning of major drops in the US dollar. So the US dollar is weakening relative to other global currencies, and there's a few reasons why this has very important implications for financial markets and the economy. Firstly, a lower US dollar makes goods that are produced in the United States cheaper to the rest of the world. Let's take a scenario where $1 equals €1. A car produced in the US costing $50,000 would cost 50,000 euros to Europeans. Then all of a sudden, the US dollar weakens by 10% relative to the euro. That same $50,000 car would now cost 45,000 euros. So US produced cars suddenly become more attractive for Europeans to buy. This is what happens when the US dollar weakens, but not just for cars, for all US products, and not just for Europe, for the entire world. This is a very direct mechanism through which a lower US dollar has a stimulative effect on the US economy. And we can see this happen very clearly throughout history by looking at a survey called the ISM PMI that measures the US manufacturing sector's performance over time. This shows us the ups and downs in the manufacturing economy in the US. And if we add the US dollar on top, we see that the two have a very clear inverse correlation. When the dollar goes up, the manufacturing sector typically slows down. When the dollar declines, manufacturing typically picks up. If we flip around the US dollar, we see this correlation even more clearly. So a big decline in the US dollar right now would likely have a stimulative effect on manufacturing activity in the US. And if we look at what happens to the stock market during cyclical pickups in manufacturing, the S&P 500 typically performs quite well. So that's the impact the dollar can have through the economy. But it also has a direct impact on how the stock market is priced. The reason for that is because 41% of the S&P 500's revenues come from abroad. So that means that 41% of the S&P 500's revenues are denominated in other currencies than the US dollar. A weakening dollar means that other currencies are strengthening against the dollar. When that happens, it mechanically makes that 41% of revenues bigger. Again, let's take a hypothetical scenario where $1 equals €1. A US company that makes 100 million euros in revenues in Europe will report $100 million in revenue in its earnings call. But now all of a sudden, the dollar weakens by 10%. That same 100 million euros will now be worth $110 million. And so this very simple mechanism naturally pushes up the price of a stock or an index that has exposure to foreign currencies. This is why when we look at all of the big declines in the US dollar that we've had since the financial crisis, all of them, with no exception, have been accompanied by a substantial rise in the S&P 500 index.